Hello and welcome to another talk we're doing here at SICE to celebrate influential women of the moment and all that they stand for. This time hosted by myself, Lydia.
And me, Tasha.
We're back for part two, this time to discuss inclusivity and representation. Does everyone want to just introduce themselves again? Do you want to tell me who you are, what your shoe size is, your favourite silhouette and why?
Yeah, I'm Kitty Cowell. I'm a UK 5.5 and my favourite silhouette is the Nike Air Tech Challenge. This is a very old pair from, well, it's older than me, so let's not talk about how old I am. And it's because Andre Agassi is the coolest tennis player and I think one of the coolest sportsmen besides Jordan, obviously. And that is because if you see the adverts back in the day when he used to do them with Nike, you have people like the Red Hot Chili Peppers in them. They are just punk rock AF, and I think they're dope.
I'm Andrea. I'm a UK 6, and my favorite silhouette is the Air Force One because growing up as a teenager, I saw Missy Elliott wearing Nike Air Force Ones, and her being a plus size woman really led an example for me. And she was really the only role model. So yeah, that's why.
Hey, I'm Coco Mel and I'm a UK size 7. And my favorite silhouette has to be the Shox, Nike Shox TLs, and this special pair, the Comme des Garçons collab, because the Shox were the first pair of trainers I ever owned back when I was 10 years old. So it's over 20 years ago. And yeah, they're always just my favorite silhouette. I just love everything about it, the color, the fit, the style, everything.
Hey, I'm Shan. I'm a size 3 and my favorite silhouette is the Jordan 6. This pair is my favorite. It's the Lady May Jordan 6. And the reason why is because after spending years having to wear the grade school shaped Jordan 6, this is actually the first pair that was done in the actual adult shape. So it's the only pair I have in my collection that is identical to what Michael Jordan would have worn. And so they're really special. And not only that, but they have a woman designer. And yeah, so that's really special in terms of even pushing the female sneaker culture forward. So this is a really special pair in my collection.
Okay, so this last year has seen not only an unprecedented shift in the way we live our lives, but also the way in which we discuss inclusivity and attitudes surrounding race, gender, and areas which we've discussed previously, such as body image. This is collectively to all of you. So what is the biggest change, if any, you've seen relating to these topics?
I mean, more discussion of inclusivity and what that means, I think, has been the biggest change, because that word has been flying around the industry for a long time and flying around the internet for a long time. But in terms of, campaigns in like the sneaker and streetwear world, it's been very important to actively see physical change, and not just in front of us, but also behind the scenes. And we all know that within the movements that have been happening, both physically and on, the virtual world, we've all pushed collectively for brands to showcase what is going on behind the scenes. And I think actually that's been insane. Like, there are a lot of things that I just never thought that we as people had the power to really like push without, I guess, causing a lot of hassle in a negative way, like, I don't know, my aunties used to physically put themselves like, what's the word, like tie themselves up to railings and, get arrested by the police and, physically protest. Although we've been doing physical protests, they've been much more peaceful, but we've almost been able to be more authentic with the things that we're saying via the power of the internet. And I think that's been amazing to see. And to have brands actually answer us and say, yeah, well, we've got this percentage of, this and this going on behind the scenes. And it's like, I never saw that happen before in my lifetime. And I don't remember any stories of my parents telling me stuff like that happened in their lifetime. So yeah, it's been really interesting from a physical, like visual perspective, being able to see, like numbers of the kinds of people that work behind the scenes, I think is the most interesting thing. In campaigns, yeah, it's great to see more diversity, but like we've discussed in the first episode, like Andrea said, it's like, is that just a token black woman in that shoot? What else are you doing? But one thing that is really positive, I just had a campaign come out that I styled at the end of last year, and it was almost a full female creative team behind it. And so it's a lot of imagery, like it's a big campaign for Echo, the shoe brand, which I know is not sold in size, it's not that cool of a brand, but it's the most diverse campaign that I've ever seen and definitely ever worked on. Like, it's a 3-day shoot, so we were allowed to get a lot of people involved and keep it safe by spreading it out over 3 days. But we have people who, you know, are disabled, we have people from all ethnicities, all sexes. Like, it's so, I physically feel like there is change because I've not been able to be involved in a campaign that's been quite that diverse before.
I think for me, like before this year, we all knew that like diversity was something that should have been at the forefront, but I feel like it was more like a wishy-washy word that people kind of said, and there was no like real what's the word, like there was no like real thought behind it, or like why we need diversity, or the true like impact it has on people that don't see themselves in places. And I think the last year, particularly after the death of George Floyd, for me personally, it's been really poignant to be able to have conversations and not feel like I'm not able to speak about the fact that I don't feel represented, without having the fear of like almost being chastised or being problematic. And I think for me, it's been really important to even openly be like, I stand here and represent Black women. Like, before it would have been like, how can you say that? Or I wouldn't have had the confidence to really come out and be able to say, like, this is what I stand and represent. But it's almost like it's given this whole movement, and it's shown almost the positive side of social media where we can really come together and affect real change. And for me, like, even on social media and seeing like people talking about their experiences of not being represented, or it kind of validated my own experiences where I'm like, whoa, so when I was feeling this was actually real racism, or this was real almost being cut out of a certain narrative. And I think it's important. I think we are making positive waves towards the right place, but again, there is this kind of fine line between inclusivity and tokenism. And I think the more we really talk about the nitty gritty of it, like how I feel, how other creatives that are not seen feel, and brands give us the platforms to really be able to talk about why it's important that we're all represented, then I think we do kind of run the risk of it going back to that kind of wishy-washy buzzword, I've got a Black girl in sneakers on my platform. Do you know what I mean? So, but I have been very grateful to be able to have so many conversations with so many important people in the industry, where I have been able to be like, I don't see myself, and what are you going to do about it?
Just to add to what Shan said, it's a very behind the scenes kind of thing. But before all this happened within the past year, being offered campaigns and stuff, I always went back to the brand and asked who's on the campaign to see if there's actually diversity where I take part. And within the past year, I now feel like I don't really have to do that anymore, because brands are changing and actually implementing the change. It's a really small example, but this is something that actually makes me think, wow, okay, there's change happening.
I think for me, I think globally seeing brands finally wake up and realize that the word like inclusivity doesn't just sit in their handbook. Like, they have to do more than just print it like in black and white. Do you know what I mean? Like, in the staff room, it has to be beyond that. So I think the fact that they're being able to do it in a way that doesn't kind of conform to fit, like, I suppose, like society's like normalcy, you know, ideologies that we're currently seeing. And I think that a lot of brands are even being called out on their insincere gestures, whether through pledges, donations, or general lack of action at all. Because I think a lot of time their outward messaging on what they want to, you know, I suppose, put out to us as consumers and want us to buy into, they actually aren't even replicating that internally within their internal infrastructures. And that a lot of the time is where the discrepancy lies, I think. And it's quite telling to see a lot of brands kind of having that kind of like disjointment.
Yeah, 100%. So just quickly moving on to the next question, which is related to what everyone's just fed back, would be, how do you all personally define inclusivity now? And what is your interpretation of this?
I mean, there's a pyramid, right? We should all know that by now, should have all known that in the first place. And I think the thing that's been so like obvious from everything that has happened in 2020 especially is that exactly what Coco just said, you know, it's like, we know as a brand we have to have inclusivity, so we hire someone but we don't really listen to them. You know, that's kind of essentially what was happening. Even if they were hiring someone, a lot of the time they weren't. If you're going to have inclusivity as part of a brand, which it has to be, it should have always been, you have to be hiring the right people behind the scenes to make that happen. Because it's all good and well saying, you know, I've had conversations so much over the years with brands that, you know, I'm like, okay, so can I get a bit more scope of what this campaign is going to be like? Who else is going to be involved? Like, you know, just more information, like who else works for the brand? You know, who am I going to be working with internally? And it's really funny because I get met with, oh, we've hired someone, you know, we've got like an inclusivity person now. And I'm like, and who are they? And what's their background? Like, what do they know? And Shan will know this as well, right? In education, it's so similar, because my mum works in education and years ago used to work in fashion. So it's been a really interesting insight to see her insight of both of those worlds, if that makes sense, and how these kind of buzzwords fly around. They have to tick a box and they have to get someone to fit a criteria. But most of the time, I hate to say it, but it's literally like, oh, you know, Brenda's boyfriend needs a job, so we give it to him. Like, most people aren't qualified. And that's everything in regards to inclusivity. You know, the most important thing here is people being represented, right? Inclusivity means that everybody can see themselves. And like I said, you can't always see. I mean, sometimes things are really visual and other times they're not. So for example, in education, people with learning disabilities, you can't see those. And quite often they don't hire the right people because they're just trying to tick a box. The pyramid is so real. And if me, a white woman who, you know, has so much privilege in many respects in my world, started a platform because I didn't see inclusivity for me. Like, it's mad, isn't it, to think like I started that journey, you know, nearly 10 years ago now, and I'm really glad at how much I have experienced. It has educated me, and you know, how much we're seeing change. But like we've all said, we don't want it to just be a buzzword, do we? Like, we need this representation and this inclusivity to be consistent. And the one positive thing I do see, and I don't think that we've really kind of like got any questions on this, but inclusivity is also, you know, the umbrella of that fits so many things underneath it. Also sustainability, and those things matter because they impact more on people that don't have as much influence in the world as some of us do, right? So it's so interesting to see how now all these brands like Nike are like, we have to be more sustainable because it's better for the planet. That affects human beings as well. So I think they have to continue with these things, but also we have to make sure that they do. And that's draining, but ultimately, hopefully we can all come together in a positive way that we can support each other to keep it happening.
For me, inclusivity is more than just like, we all know what the word means, right? Like most people know what it means to be inclusive, but I think for me, like, I'd love for everyone to go further into the meaning. And like, we all hold bias, right? So like me being like a campaign manager, my focus might be like, okay, diversity across races of women. So it might be like, my focus might be like getting lots of women who are of different shades, different races. And that is my version of what I see inclusivity being, because that is kind of what resonates with me. Someone else will be like, but you've got no one who is a bigger lady, or you've got no one that's disabled, or do you get what I'm saying? So it's like, I think inclusivity for me starts within the corporations and businesses, because if you have people who are of many different walks, backgrounds, races, gender, all that kind of stuff, then you are always going to be hit. It doesn't even have to be a tick box, because you already have the eyes and ears of people that represent so many different spaces within that organization, that you are going to see. For example, like Nike doing their Fly Ease range, like somebody would have had to have had some sort of experience within disabilities to understand that that was even a need. And if the whole headquarters was all able-bodied people, would we have ever seen like the flyees happen? So I think it as much as it is about, oh, who you put in front of the camera, I think it's actually more important about who's behind it for me. And I think that's where inclusivity starts.
So I think I would define inclusivity now as being for everything and everyone. Like, I don't think it's about kind of like necessarily like labeling one type of person underneath that umbrella. Because I think the label itself is quite subjective to the individual, like to Shan's point. It's almost like it's in the eye of the beholder. So I think obviously it varies person on person. But to me, I think it's not about like a generic one-dimensional box we have to tick anymore. I think because everyone's showing us on a daily basis that we're evolving as people. Day in, day out in lockdown, we're evolving. So I feel like on any given day, someone, might identify something that maybe we haven't got on a spectrum, for example. So it's just so many, I think, like adaptations that we're constantly seeing.
So Coco, we've seen for a long time, you've been a relentless campaigner for equal opportunities, rights and representation, which we've previously also touched on. What have you also seen emerging from this?
I think, in all honesty, a ton of performative allyship, unfortunately. I think where people or brands are like, are just hashtagging the heck out of a movement, being, BLM related. I think, they're posting narratives to maybe seem like woke, as it were, to make it seem like, that they're kind of, that they're for the cause. All the while knowing, obviously, it's not really coming from a sincere and authentic place. But then equally so, I think the fact that cancel culture is a very real thing. I think a lot of people now are aware of that. So I think they're trying to move a little bit more strategically, especially like post like black boxes, like black squares. Like we're now needing to see more like, people, they're being held accountable, which finally is kind of great to see. I think people kind of getting pulled to the forefront.
Yeah, 100%. There's that accountability attached with what we're seeing. Also, Kitty, I just want to touch back on about, you've spoken about inclusivity on the basis of non-binary and genderless representation, plus the equal footing of men and women. Do you feel that this has been spoken about enough? And how would you like this to manifest itself in the industry more so? And are there any standout brands that you see working with this?
It's a really interesting thing to talk about in regards to everything that we have been touching upon today, because when we talk about inclusivity now, it means a lot more than it used to. And in regards to gender boundaries, really, within the industry, within the fashion industry, within the sneaker industry, it has been really interesting to see how much of a buzzword and sort of how much movement there was a few years ago within that sector, and how, unisex culture was really fashionable. We even had an entire floor dedicated to it in Selfridges briefly. That doesn't exist anymore. And I think that says a lot for what the industry sees being important within that world. I've been told that, for example, internally within a lot of very big brands, they know that it's important, but where people change and leave, those people that carried the momentum a few years ago are no longer there, or they're in different positions. So that sort of bat has been passed and it's not been continued in the same way. So I think I'd like to see it being brought up a lot more. The thing that I was always met with from the sneaker industry was, well, men and women are different and their feet are different and their shape and their size is different. And although I understand that, I'm educated enough to be aware of, those things, we all wear men's and women's shoes. We all, like, men wear women's releases, women wear men's releases. And I think from a footwear lifestyle perspective, unless we're talking about something that carries, sort of ergonomical importance, for example, running, it's irrelevant, and they need to stop throwing that in our face. Because if they released so many of the male releases in small sizes, they would be sold. And their problem was either that it's complicated because we have to make, two different molds because, it's not unisex because men and women are different, or it's, oh, well, we'll make it in smaller shoe sizes and like people won't buy it. But the demand is there. And like, I can't believe that, for example, the unisex mode started 9 years ago, and we pushed and really made it very clear that the need and want was there. And now all of these women who are supporting the sneaker world are making it very clear that we want those sizes. to be available for us. So yeah, I think the momentum is floating around still, and it is still fairly fashionable. But like many of these things, had its moment. And the problem with that is it's not just a fashion movement, you know? So in terms of brands that are doing it well, I mean, it's difficult to say. In terms of unisex fashion, there's lots of male streetwear that brands sort of go, oh, we're unisex, and it's fine. Like I'm wearing a full male tracksuit right now, but there really aren't very many unisex brands anymore. A lot of them that did do it a few years ago have branched back off into separate male and female collections. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot about that I like, but I think what they're missing is the fact that we're having a moment with men where unisex fashion is really important to them as much as it was to women a few years ago. You're seeing guys and straight guys just as much as gay guys, just as much as, you know, everybody wanting to wear crop tops, wanting to wear skirts, you know. So I think it's something that really, from a fashion perspective, brands need to pay a lot more attention to doing. That's my opinion.
It's a great comment and opinion to have on that, and I definitely support everything that you've said there. It's about abstaining that and seeing that continue, the narrative like working forward. So that's collectively to everyone, what has been a highlight of everyone's career so far?
I think the highlight of my career was when I was asked to be part of the Jordan women's wear launch last year, and because this was the first time they were launching women's wear, and me being a curvy girl being on this campaign, I was just it like really was a game changer, and I feel like it had such an impact on the sneaker community for women, because it's such a big step and we're finally getting somewhere.
I did the Nike Move to Zero campaign last year, and it was in JD stores. That was a pretty big thing, and it was really exciting because it was the Move to Zero campaign, and it was all about sustainability, and that was something that I've been talking about a lot in the industry before, so it was cool to actually be chosen for that, and also just to see myself in JD stores was a bit mad. But then as a stylist, there's loads of things that have been, you know, it's amazing actually more so to see when your work is in stores and on billboards. But the thing that I'm most proud of right now, even though, like I said before, it's not the most exciting brand or not exciting, it's not, you know, considered the coolest, but the Echo shoe campaign that's just come out, I'm just so proud of the diversity that's in it. We have a female basketball player that is disabled, for example, and that's just one example. So that's pretty cool. Hope to see that in bigger brands as well.
So I think for me, it was definitely being on the sneakers app. So I got to do the What You Got feature, which was just crazy. I was actually like the first person that doesn't already have like a relationship with Nike who was chosen to do that episode. And what's really exciting is that they knew nothing about me. They didn't know anything about like the whole Shan's Got Soul platform. So when they chose me and like they saw like my backdrop and like you can see I'm a bit of a Nike enthusiast, they were like completely like blown away. And when I sent them a picture of my room, they were like, we can't believe people have stuff like this in their house. Like, this is crazy. What was really cool is that they chose me because the pairs that I wanted to speak about were all based around women in the culture. So whether that was a women's release or a women's designer, those were like the hype kind of pairs in my collection that I chose to speak about, which I think was really cool because it kind of highlights how far we've come in sneaker culture as women. And not just the fact that we're wearing them, but also like we're getting amazing, even like colors, like the off-white Jordan 4 like being one of the sneakers of the year. As a women's shoe for me was amazing. And just some of like the unknown kind of female designers also. I thought that was important, like CPFM, the Vapor Max. So yeah, it was amazing just to be like on the phone with Nike as like a sneakerhead was incredible.
I think for me, I don't know, it's so tough, but I think for me, probably the highlight would be last year when I was able to see my work in Shoreditch, across like Box Park, billboards, buses, and yeah, shop fronts alike as well. I think globally, but in terms of something that I kind of hold dear to me, I think it was definitely styling coffee, the Reggae Artist Coffee last year, because that was a great shoot to be part of, because not only being approached by Jordan brand themselves, but I think because they wanted to build a cast and crew that was only Black females. So Black females here with me and my team starting here in the UK, but then also the photographer, and all the, you know, the gaffer, the DOP as well in Jamaica were all Black female as well. So that was a really kind of, I think, pivotal moment, I think, in the culture that I saw and I was able to, lucky enough, to be part of as well.
I love that, guys. They're all proper like pinch me moments. So thank you for sharing those. Another one that I want to get into now is if you could tell your 15-year-old self something, what would that be?
Nike are gonna gift you sneakers. That was like the biggest thing when I first started doing all of this, because I just used to post like pictures of like these, for example, and that's all that I really wanted. But then on a bigger level, just that you're going to love yourself a lot more and life is going to get a lot better. Yeah, not to get too deep, but things go on.
I think for me, it would probably be just do it. Like just do it. Don't worry about what the next person's gonna say in response, or don't worry what your friends are doing. Just do it because you want to do it, and ultimately, like, you back it. So don't be afraid of anyone's comments or thoughts. Don't let anyone else's insecurities kind of, I suppose, transition onto you.
I think mine would be to love yourself, and no matter what you see or what the standard of beauty is, like, you deserve self-love and you will get to that point eventually. But external validation is not something that you need to define your own beauty or to love your skin.
Yeah, for me as well, it's to love myself more, and also to be a bit more selfish, a healthy selfish, because I'm naturally a non-selfish person, and I feel like it has made me focus more on myself and led me to walk in my purpose.
Honestly, I feel like I'm getting emotional listening to those, but yeah, definitely like love yourself, and just I feel like the confidence as well with what you do, like believe in yourself, is a big one. Just to wrap up, so I've got my last question now to everyone. Do you feel that women are beginning to turn the wheel more? And if not, how do you want to see this progress and build on?
I think we're definitely turning the wheel. I think we're building the wheel, we're turning the wheel, we're owning the wheel. Like, I think we're doing it all. I think if the last year has shown us anything, it's that, like, there is no limitations. Like, there's no glass ceiling. Like, it is as high and as tall as we want to take it. So I definitely think we're doing it. I think in terms of, I suppose, who's doing it, I think aside from obviously the amazing women that I'm here with on the panel, I would say platforms like NBG, Nothing But Gold via Nike. I think they're doing some really great things at the moment, championing women globally, you know, whether that's from dope fits or, you know, sustainable standings or anything of that nature. I think they're absolutely smashing it out of the park, along with Sneakers by Women as well, which is a really amazing, great social media platform created by Julia. She's just doing amazing things, very humble, very modest, but she'd really putting in work. Even for me as a stylist and someone who, you know, I feel like I'm quite aware of a lot of brands, but I feel like I actually go to her platform just to get the top liners that I know I'll need for that week to set me up, so I can kind of go into meetings with a little bit of more of a knowledge of things that I maybe wouldn't have known had she not posted about it. So they're probably like my top two that I'm feeling right now.
We are living in an amazing time where every woman can be herself, and there's a space for everyone, regardless of who you are, what you look like whatever. You can create a space, and one, there'll be so many women who'll be grateful for that space that you have created. And secondly, like, for me, creating a space has given me so much more confidence, self-love. Like, I'm literally like having moments every day that I can be proud of myself. So I think for me, like, the more women that I'm surrounded by and I see every day who are doing this, is the more, like, I do believe, like, not only like what Coco said, like we're turning the wheel, like we actually are the wheel, I think now, like we literally are like the thing that's moving not only sneaker culture forward, but I genuinely, this is going to sound so cheesy, but I genuinely think like women are making the world like move forward. And just platforms like this and brands like actually taking the interest in not just like, oh, what can you do for our brand, but literally trying to get to the nitty gritty of like who we are as people. I think these conversations can only continue the wheel moving forward. Like Coco said, Sneakers by Women is probably one of the best Instagram pages, not even Instagram pages, but spaces that we have as women. Julia is incredible. I remember speaking to her like just before she started her platform, and she was in the middle of starting her platform, and she's so humble. And to me, like she represents someone who is not even sure whether she has the ability to do the space, but she's doing it anyway. And for me, like her platform definitely inspires me every day. Another one, Kicks and Throws and CNK Daily, they're two platforms specifically for Black women. And they provide a space particularly for me, because every time I go onto their page, I see myself. And it kind of takes away some of that going to other spaces and feeling left out. I feel almost like I fit in somewhere. And that's really important to me.
I think something that's really important to me and always has been from the get-go is seeing women on the same level, like being seen on the same level as men. And that's something that I continuously want to keep pushing for, because I think it's amazing that we have these spaces now. And I think it's very relevant to say that like within those spaces, we do feel more heard and seen, and even more so, you know, for Black women to have spaces where they can have a conversation and feel empowered, as opposed to just women, you know, where people weren't being heard at all. I'm really glad that those spaces are there. But the thing that I want to see is Black women in conversation with white men, you know. And the thing that I'm missing, I feel like there's a lot more of that going on, but you know, I get a bit bored of, although I'm so glad that things like Hype Bay exist, for example. I'm just using it as a example because everybody knows it. I'm kind of sick of seeing us segregated. I want to see more women, and I definitely want to see more Black women on Hype Beast. Again, just an example, because everyone's so aware of these platforms. And so, yeah, that's something that I definitely think is happening, and I'm really glad to see it. Annoyingly, I'm not on Clubhouse, but from what I've seen, there's been a lot more of that going on, which is really cool. And again, I know that there are a lot of these spaces where it's just women talking to women, and I think it's so important and valid for us to have those spaces, because we can say things without being attacked, quite frankly, by people that don't agree. But for me, the goal is to see women being on the same pedestal as men in the spaces that we look up to. So yeah, I think it's happening, and it's a really exciting time. It's felt like it's been slowly getting there for so long to me that I'm just always waiting for it to be pushed back a little bit, you know. So I hope that we keep the momentum going. But from what I've heard, Clubhouse has been a really exciting space, and I've seen some really interesting men put women onto, you know, spaces and talks and conversations, and especially Black women in the sneaker world. So that's cool. Yeah, I think we've still got lots of work to do, but it's an exciting time to be in.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very exciting time, and not only like in the forefront what we see, but I work with a lot of brands in the background as a talent agent, and I see their stuff is changing. There's more women of color, of all types of ethnicities, you know, and that's really where the change starts anyways, because if the brands don't do the work, no one can go further. Like us content creators, we're not going anywhere if we don't really speak to the brands about it.
One extra little thing that you just reminded me, Andrea, is that the thing that with unisex culture, a lot of my friends who are plus size were drawn towards it if they were into sneakers and streetwear, just because they're like, oh, well, I can potentially fit into that, right? And specifically, one of my friends who's been a big sneaker collector and is a plus size woman, she's collected for a long time. really stopped wanting to be in that space, because she was like, even though, you know, maybe I can wear a guy's t-shirt, it doesn't fit me in a way that I want it to. And that draws back to the question that you asked me earlier, Lydia, about, you know, what are brands doing to create this space and continue going forward with being diverse and inclusive. And I think that's a big part of it. If a plus size woman doesn't want to wear, you know, men's clothing anymore, which potentially she was pushed towards because she might fit into it, there's an issue there that she shouldn't have been being pushed into it in the first place. And I know I keep saying, and, you know, not saying that like we need to say that men's opinions are important or whatever, but it's something men also want, and plus size guys want just as much. So I think that that's an interesting thing that is just being completely ignored right now. There are lots of different kinds of people, and they all need to be represented in terms of not just being seen in campaigns, but they're making shoes and clothes that are right for different kinds of people.
That's definitely right. That now brings me to the end of my questions. I just want to wrap part 2 up and thank everyone for being involved. Keep inspiring and keep doing what you're doing, because honestly, it's so great to see from a brand perspective and like a personal perspective as well. I think it comes across well, and we never know who that's influencing or inspiring to start doing something. So thank you for everyone's time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.